We continue now at the top of Daf Ayin Dalet Amud Beis in Meseches Menachos. This is Menachos Daf 74b. On the previous Amud, Ravina asked if a Kohen eats from the Emurin, so what's the halacha? And the Gemara in the previous Amud explained, in terms of the lav of Zaras, there's a lav of V'chol Zor lo yochal Kodesh. A non-Kohen is not allowed to eat Kodesh. So with regards to this as well, if a Kohen is eating the Emurim, he's essentially a Zar legabe the Emurim. He's essentially a Zar legabe those sacrificial portions that are supposed to be burned on the Mizbeach. They are not supposed to be eaten, and so that's why the Gemara continues and says, Lo kami boili. That's not a question to me. In terms of that lav of V'chol Zor lo yochal Kodesh, it is obvious that this would be a violation if the Kohen eats from the Emurin, if the Kohen eats from the sacrificial portions of a carbon that need to be burned on the Mizbeach. And so what is the question? Ki kami boili, what is a question to me? Lav de kolel tia. The question is the negative commandment of kolel tia, that it should be entirely burned. Now kolel tia is by the mincha of Kohanim, it should be entirely burned. There's a negative commandment associated with that if it's eaten, so then that's a violation because it's supposed to be totally burned. But what about over here? Does it apply to the sacrificial portions of, let's say, an animal carbon? Does it apply this lav of kolel tia? It's supposed to be totally burned, it's not supposed to be eaten. So what's the halacha? Is it in fact a violation in terms of the lav of kolel tia? And the Gemara continues and answers, Amar Rav Aaron LaRavina. Rav Aaron said to Ravina, Tashma, come in here, a proof from the following brisa, the Tanya. As we learned in a brisa, Rabbi Eliezer says, Kol shu b'kolel tia, any part of a carbon that is supposed to be entirely burned, that would include the sacrificial portions, litein lo saseh al achila. So there is in fact a lo saseh on eating it. And the Rashi Ksaviyat explains, Lo kami boili, that's not a question to vadai chayiv. Certainly there's a liability in terms of a chol zar lo yochal kodesh, sharei zar, who etzli is considered a zar with regards to the emurin. Ki kami boili, when is it a question to me, lav de kolel tia, that lav of kolel tia, mikoin nami akol haniktarim, does that go on anything that's burned on the mizbeach? O dilma amenachos lechudayu, or maybe it only goes on menachos. And the Gemara continues with the Mishnah, Minchas Kohanim, the Mincha of Kohanim, that refers to a regular voluntary carbon Mincha brought by Kohanim, Uminchas Kohen Mashiach, and the Mincha of the anointed Kohen, that's the Mincha of the Kohen Gadol, also known as the Chavisin, again, half of it brought in the morning, half of it brought in the afternoon, Uminchas Nesachim, and also the Mincha of libations, that refers to any carbon Mincha which accompanies an animal offering. Many animal offerings have an accompanying carbon Mincha and accompanying Nesachim, accompanying libations. All of those, La Mizbeach, all of those are entirely burned on the Mizbeach. Ve'ein bohen laKohanim. There's no portion of them that are eaten by the Kohanim. Uvozeh, and in this group of offerings, Yofe koach Mizbeach mikoach haKohanim. The koach of the Mizbeach, the strength of the Mizbeach, it is stronger than the strength of the Kohanim. And the Mishnah continues, Shtei halechem, with regards to the Shtei halechem, that's the two loaves of Atzeres, of Shavuos, Velechem haponim, and the Lechem haponim, that is the bread, that is the weekly bread on the Shulchan. That's the opposite. That's Necholim laKohanim, that's entirely eaten by the Kohanim, both the Shtei halechem and the Lechem haponim. Ve'ein bohem lemizbeach, and there is no portion that is burned on the Mizbeach. Uvozeh, and in this group of offerings, Yofe koach haKohanim mikoach haMizbeach. The strength of the Kohanim is greater than the strength of the Mizbeach. And the Gemara continues, V'su leka, are there no other examples? Va'ika ola, but what about ola? What the Gemara is asking is, the ola also is entirely burned on the Mizbeach. And again, in this Mishnah, it said, Uvazeh yofe koach Mizbeach mikoach Kohanim. Wouldn't that be true by the carbon ola as well? The Gemara says, well, it's not really true, because ika ora la Kohanim, with regards to the carbon ola, it's not entirely to the Mizbeach. The Kohanim do get something. The Kohanim get the hide of the carbon. But the Gemara continues, Va'ika ola sa'of, but what about the bird ola? There's no hide over there. And the Gemara answers to that, Ika mora v'notza, there we have the crop and the feathers. Now that's not given to the Kohanim, but it's not given to the Mizbeach either. These are actually placed next to the Mizbeach on the Makom Hadesh, in the place of the ashes. And the Gemara continues, Va'ika nesachim, but what about nesachim? The libations, the nesachim, they go entirely to the Mizbeach. And the Gemara says to that, that's not really true. Lashisin azli, they actually drain through holes that are on the Mizbeach. They drain down to the shisin in the depths, and therefore technically they're not really going on the Mizbeach. And the Gemara continues and asks, Umay bazu, what does the Mishnah mean when it says bazu, meaning to say the Mishnah has this line, uvazeh, and in this group, yofe koach mizbeach mikoach haKohanim, what is that coming to exclude? And the Gemara says, la'afuke mid Shmuel, that's coming to exclude what Shmuel said. Diamar Shmuel, because Shmuel said, hamisnadev yayin, if somebody donates wine, mevio umizalfo al gabe ishim, actually it is brought and it is sprinkled over the fires. And so therefore our Mishnah is not an agreement. Kamash malon, that's what our Mishnah is teaching, de l'shisin az nazli, that actually it goes down to the shis and it goes down to the depths. It's not sprinkled on the mizbeach, and that's what the Mishnah essentially is saying. Uvazeh, in this group of offerings, here we have an example where it's totally to the mizbeach. That would not be true by the wine, according to the Mishnah. And the Gemara continues and says, Messiah leila Shmuel, in another way, our Mishnah actually supports Shmuel. The Amar Shmuel, because Shmuel says, Hamisnadev shemen, one who donates oil. One might have thought if one donates oil, it is entirely burned on the mizbeach. Maybe it should have been included in the list in our Mishnah as well, but it is not included, because again, it supports the idea of Shmuel, that one who donates oil, it is not entirely burned on the mizbeach, rather komtso, one takes a fistful of the oil. The assumption over here is that the oil is thick enough that a kmitza is possible, and then v'shirav necholim, the remainder actually is eaten, therefore again, it is not entirely burned on the mizbeach, and that's why it is not in the Mishnah. And the Gemara continues at the two dots. The Mishnah said, Shtei halechem v'lechem haponim. The Shtei halechem and the lechem haponim, they are entirely eaten by the Kohanim. And the Gemara says, V'suleka, are there no other examples of items that are entirely eaten by the Kohanim? V'ika chatas ha'of, what about the bird carbon chatas? That is entirely eaten by the Kohanim, and so therefore there is none of that to the Mizbeach. The Gemara says that's not entirely true. Ika dama, there is the applications of the blood to the Mizbeach. But the Gemara continues and asks, V'ika log shemen shel metzora, what about the log of oil of the metzora? That is entirely eaten, it does not go on the Mizbeach. And the Gemara says that's also not entirely true. Ika matanosov, there are applications of that as well, the applications of that oil. And the Gemara continues and asks, Umay bazu, again, what does the Mishnah mean when it says bazu? It says, Uvazeh yafe koach kohanim, that in this category, the kohanim have strength more than the koach ha-mizbeach, more than the strength of the Mizbeach. And again, that was specifying specifically the shtei halechem and the lechem haponim. So what's that coming to exclude? That's la'afuke miman damar, it comes to exclude the one who says shtei halechem habos b'fnei atzman. Let's say you have shtei halechem that they come on their own. Normally the shtei halechem on Shavuos, they're accompanied with the offerings of sheep, but let's say they're coming on their own. So there's one man d'amar that says l'sreifa asyan. There's one man d'amar that says that it does not go to the kohanim, but it's entirely burned. And so kamash malon, the Mishnah is teaching us no. Divazu yafe koach kohanim liolam, that even in this situation, by shtei halechem habos b'fnei atzman, the kohanim, they have strength, meaning to say it's entirely eaten by the kohanim. And we should note over here that when the Gemara asks umay bazu and then says la'afuke, it sounds like it's an exclusion. That's actually what the Gemara said above as well. Umay bazu la'afuke mida Shmuel. It comes to exclude Shmuel, essentially saying it comes to exclude the case of wine. But this la'afuke actually is not an exclusion. It actually is an inclusion in the end, because we're excluding the one who says the shtei halechem habos b'fnei atzman are l'sreifa, and rather no, we're not saying like that man damar. Instead, our Mishnah includes the case of shtei halechem habos b'fnei atzman. Even that is eaten by Kohanim. And the Gemara continues with the Mishnah, Kol ha-menachos ha-nasos b'kli, all menachos which are made in a vessel, to unos shlosha matanos shemen, they require 3 applications of oil. It's yitzika uvlila umatan shemen b'kli kodem lasiyasan. We'll see Rashi in a moment, but yitzika blila, yitzika literally means pouring, blila literally means mixing, and then matan shemen b'kli means the application of the oil in the vessel, kodem lasiyasan, before they are made. And the Mishnah continues, chalos, with regards to the loaves, bolalan, those are mixed. Divrei Rebbe, these are the words of Rebbe. The Chachamim omrim, and the Chachamim say, soles hachalos, the fine flour of the chalos to unos belila, those require belila mixing. Urikikin, with regards to the wafers, meshicha, those require anointing. And Ketzad moshchan, how does one anoint? And the Mishnah says, kimin ki, it's in the shape of a key. The word ki over here means chaf yavanis, it's a Greek letter. It's in that particular shape. V'hashar, and then the remainder, necholin lekohanim, that is eaten by the kohanim. And Rashi Ksaviyat explains, Hanasos Bekli, again talking about menachos that are made in a vessel. Mefarish Begamar Lemute Mai. The Gemara will explain what this comes to exclude. Kodem Lasiyasim, before they are made, means as follows. Nosein Tchila Shemen Bekli. First oil is placed in the vessel. Venosein Sola Saleh, and then the fine flour is placed upon it. Velasha Beposhin, and then it is kneaded in lukewarm water. Venosein Shema Ale Uvola, then more shemen is added and it's mixed. Vechozer Venosein Ale Shemen, and then he goes ahead and puts in more shemen. L'kayim mitzvahs yitzika, in order to fulfill the mission of yitzika, of the pouring of the oil. And then the Mishnah said, V'hachalos bolalan, the chalos are mixed. That's leminchas machavas u'marcheshes. That's talking about the minchas machavas, the pan mincha, and the marcheshes, the deep pan mincha. Kishehein chalos, when they are loaves, afuyos, when they're baked loaves, bolalan, then he mixes them, meaning shechozer uposalan, that he actually crumbles it up, v'nosein shemen levolan, and then he puts in oil in order to mix them. That's what it means, chalos bolan, and so essentially the oil is mixed after it is baked, and so there we have a machlokas. V'chachamim omrim, the chachamim argue. They dispute what Rebbe says, and they say kishein solas bolalan, that it's actually mixed with the oil when it is flour. And then the Mishnah said hachalos bolalan, again with regards to chalos, it's mixed with oil. Urikikin, with regards to wafers, moshchan, it's anointed with oil. And hashta ma'ari b'minchas mafe, Rashi explains here we're talking about the baked karban mincha, and moshchan shalemim, when they are whole, they are anointed with oil, and ki, that's the letter ki, chaf yavanis, os yavanis, it was a Greek letter, vasuya kamin tes, Rashi says it's the shape of a tes, kahafrashas godel me'etzba, like the separation of the thumb from the pointy finger. Ushar hashemen, and then the rest of the oil, nechal kohanim, that is eaten by the kohanim. That's what that last line in the Mishnah means. Again, when the Mishnah concludes vahashar, it's referring to the remainder of the oil. And the Gemara says, L'mu'utei mai, what does this come to exclude? That's going on the first line of the Mishnah. Kol ha-menachos ha-nasos bekli, all minchas that are made in a vessel. What does that come to exclude? Amar Rav Papa says, L'mu'utei minchas mafe, that comes to exclude the minchas mafe, the baked mincha. And Rashi Ksaviyat explains, ha-nasos bekli l'mu'utei mai, l'mu'utei minchas mafe, it excludes minchas mafe, divitanur nefes techila, that over there it's actually baked in the oven first, u'miyitzika mimitla, so it's excluded from the yitzika, and this will be explained later on. And the basic point over here is that yitzika is that last pouring of the oil. From that, the minchas mafe is excluded. And the Gemara continues, Tanu Rabbanan, the sages taught on a brisa, v'minchas marcheshes karbonecha, solas b'Hashem and Tayaset, talks about the minchas marcheshes, the deep pan mincha. And what is the pasuk teaching us? Malamed, it teaches us, shetu'una matan shemen bekli, that the matan shemen, that the application of oil has to be in the vessel. And karbonecha, the word karbonecha in this pasuk, it's used for gzeira shava. And Rashi Ksaviyat explains, B'Hashem tayasem mashma b'soch Hashem tinasen. It's understood to mean in the shemen it should be put. Al matuna litein shemen techila kodem lasiyasa. You see that the shemen actually has to be placed in the vessel before making the mincha. Uva minchas marcheshes ksiv. Now this pasuk is written by the minchas marcheshes. Now v'gamrin on karbonecha. Now we then learn a gzeira shava of karbonecha. That nemar kan karbonecha b'marcheshes. It says over here karbonecha by marcheshes. V'nemar karboncha b'machavas. It also says that by machavas, and so therefore we learn the same idea by the pan mincha. B'minchas machavas ksiv belila v'yitzika. And Rashi here continues, by the minchas machavas it says belila and yitzika, the mixing and the pouring. V'lo ksiv matan shemen shebetchila, but it doesn't say that initial matan shemen, the placing of the oil again in the vessel first, that the first thing put in the vessel is the oil. Over marcheshes ksiv matan shemen, and the point over here is that by marcheshes it's the opposite. It says matan shemen, v'lo ksiv belila v'yitzika. It doesn't say belila and yitzika. You have these three applications or placings of the oil, but one of them is written in one place, two of them are written in the other. And so the whole point of the Gemara is v'gamrin an hach mehach. We learn this one from this one, and we will continue with this discussion in the next video on Daf Ayin Hey Amud Aleph.